Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 23. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank all of you who have liked, shared, and subscribed to the show. Your continued support allows us to bring on more expert level guests and highlight more people in the profession, just like our guest today. I also want to thank Cerberus Strength for bringing you this podcast today for free. Cerberus is an organization that puts the athlete first and is actively working towards providing the best quality gear at an affordable price. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus has quickly evolved into a global brand symbolizing quality and trust. Their ever-growing product range is used by the top athletes around the world at the highest level of competition. And every single Cerberus Strength product has been designed with performance in mind, with the highest attention to detail. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to receive an extra 10% off your next order. In this week's episode, I am joined by a new friend of mine, one of my mentors, good mentors, brother, Coach Phil Johnson. Phil is the owner and operator of Got Strength Gym in Iowa City, Iowa, as well as the strength conditioning coach for the Got Strength weightlifting team, which is a USAW affiliated club team that works in partnership with the Iowa City Parks and Rec Department to offer the sport of Olympic weightlifting to the local community. In addition, Phil is also an adjunct professor at the University of Iowa in the Health and Human Physiology Department. Coach Johnson has been involved in many different facets of the sports performance profession, including the college sector as an intern coach at the University of Iowa, before coaching at both Northern Arizona University and Florida State University. He's also spent some time in the private sector, interning for Mike Boyle Strength Conditioning, all while operating his own facility, Got Strength Gym, since 2005. Phil Johnson is an avid adventure seeker and extreme sports enthusiast whose athletic hobbies range from mountain biking to weightlifting to snowboarding. He's competed for multiple years in both strongman and Olympic weightlifting and still continues to train adventure bikes and train weightlifting currently. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today and share with you guys. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Phil Johnson. What's going on, everybody? I'm excited. I am joined by a new friend of mine and one of my all-time mentors, brother from the good old state of Iowa, Phil Johnson. How's it going, man?
Good, Nick. Nice to meet you, man. It's kind of cool to connect finally. I've heard stories and I always have loved, the Georgetown crew and obviously my brother is a mentor of mine as well. So we kind of have that common connection. So glad to be here, man.
Yeah, it's cool. It's been over a decade in the making, and I've heard countless stories about the Johnson brothers, and I've only known half of it. So it's really cool to connect and get to actually hear some real stories and hopefully hear some Carl ones for some secret ones for later.
Oh, dude, no, we don't even want to go there.
Hey, so let's hop right into it. We kind of talked a little bit briefly before we got going, but how'd you actually get started, like, in the strength game? Like, I know you're an adventurous guy. You've been competing in a bunch of different sports. You do the same thing Carl does, and you dabble in just about everything. So what really got you started in lifting, and like what kind of sports did you play getting started?
Yeah. So as a kid, I just kind of dabbled around in a lot of different activities, both school sponsored activities and outside of school. I was always an active kid. I would say I was a little rugrat. Carl and I used to run around the neighborhood just like maniacs. It was basically play every day. So I kind of grew up with a lot of freedom, which was awesome. That's one of the benefits of growing up in kind of a smaller town in the Midwest is you can ride your bike anywhere and run around everywhere. So that was kind of my childhood. But I got into, I played soccer. I did golf. I got more into, I'd say, like the extreme adventure kind of sports when I was younger. I wasn't pushed or really even like I encouraged all that much for like the whole, like, you got to do all the team stuff. There was a lot of just like, well, what do you want to do? What excites you? So there's a lot of freedom there of choice, which I really value as a parent now even. But I got into snowboarding, skateboarding, built a half pipe in our backyard. We used to have like a couple of ramps in our driveway, and eventually both Carl and I got into mountain biking. And so anyways, eventually in high school, basically I started training with weights, and I think Carl probably actually was the first one who got me in a weight room and started lifting weights. And I think like a lot of young people at first, it's more about like, just, building your body up. It wasn't like someone introduced me to the sport of Olympic weightlifting or powerlifting. It was more just kind of going in and just training by yourselves. And I just enjoyed the process. Well, then fast forward into like my college years, and I just really started to develop a passion for all things human physiology, all things high performance, health, and what can you do with this thing, this machinery and this equipment that we have, and use training as a tool to develop certain skill sets and attributes and qualities. And so, I got to just kind of fast forward through all the rest of it, because this could take the whole podcast. But as I was an undergrad, I think it was my junior year, it was health, leisure, and sports studies with an emphasis in health promotion. That was my major. And I was taking a basic athletic training class, and that basic athletic training class one day went down to visit Bill Maxwell, who's the director of Olympic sports strength and conditioning at the University of Iowa. And during that class, he just mentioned, hey, we take interns. And so anyways, I stayed after the class and I just kind of started talking to him. And so I ended up interning with him for, I think, 2 semesters, if I remember right. This is like 20 years ago now. And then after I interned with him, then I one day, actually, I started a business. This is kind of a funny story how I met Chris Doyle, if you want to hear it.
Go for it.
Okay, so I started a business actually to make money and pay for school and just kind of help me survive as a college student. And so I was an intern with Bill Maxwell doing that. But outside of that, I was doing personal training. And then I came up with this idea that I was going to start, which honestly is a great pandemic idea. It wasn't a great idea back then, but it would be perfect now. It was in-home training. I was going to do in-home training. I had a couple of clients who, just would pay me to come over to their house and train their kids and train their family. And then I'd help them kind of set up little home gyms, either in the garage. This is way before garage gyms were a thing. But I was helping them set up garage gyms and basement gyms. And well, anyways, part of that business model was I was repping some equipment manufacturers out of Milwaukee. One was Magnum Fitness Equipment. So I could, basically, get dumbbells or plates or bars from them. And then I could make some money off of selling them to whoever when I set up a home gym. And then another company I got connected with was Woodway, right? So Woodway paid for me to come up to Milwaukee and get trained as a service technician on their treadmills because they needed someone in this area. And it was just kind of like all serendipitous. I didn't really plan this. I didn't want to be a treadmill, but the opportunity was there. And I'm like, okay, sure. And it paid real well. So when I'd go service a treadmill, these are high end, treadmills. So when I, service treadmill, I'd make good money doing it. Well, one day in the middle of the winter, there's a blizzard. And I'm sitting in my house as a college student, and I get a call, and they're like, "It's Woodway," and they're like, "Yeah, the University of Iowa football weight room has a treadmill where the display needs to be repaired. We're not going to be able to send someone for like 3 days because of the blizzard, because nobody can travel from Milwaukee. Blah blah blah. Would you be willing to go do it?" So I'm like, "Sure." I live like 10 minutes from the complex, so I zip over there, and like within 2 hours, I'm over there. And as I'm there replacing this, swapping this display board that they had already sent in the mail, and so they had it there. So I just went and swapped this display board. And Chris Doyle walks over to me and he just says, "Hey, kind of like Chris Doyle, this is who he is. He he's going to thank everybody and everybody. It's just his personality." So he walks right up to me and he just says, "Hey, thanks for coming in. We know it's a blizzard. You saved our butts. We really needed this treadmill. Blah blah blah." And without even thinking about it ahead of time, I said, yeah, no problem. I said, do you ever take interns? And he stopped. He's like, well, why don't you show up tomorrow at like 6 a.m., interview with Coach Dobson and maybe. And so I was like, okay, cool. So, and the rest was history. So I ended up interning with Doyle, and I spent a few semesters there in his camp and just kind of learning the ins and outs of his system. And being in his system was really the introduction to the Mike Boyle system. And that's part of their their internship kind of curriculum is like introducing you to all the Mike Boyle videos, books, methods. And then, obviously Chris Doyle took the Mike Boyle kind of methodology and made it his own in that collegiate environment. So, so I had a really wonderful mentor experience there. And then after that, I went to Boston to work at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, which for people who aren't familiar with Mike Boyle, well, first of all, if you're a strength coach, you should know who Mike Boyle is. But second of all, his program out there, his internship system, I think it, in my opinion, is second to none. It's like a boot camp for young strength coaches. And what I mean by that is like when you go in there, it's just like they have it so well oiled. It's like this, it just brings you along this kind of process of like, these are the things you need to read to understand like the background. And then this is how you teach, this is how you cue. And then you get like hands-on practice, and they have like, so it's just a really great place if you want to just get thrown in the trenches. And it's hard because you're working like, real strength coach hours, and you're just a young intern kid and not really getting paid for it. So you're there like 8 a.m. and leaving at 5, and your feet hurt at the end of the day, and you're doing this on repeat every day. But when you leave, you feel really confident about your coaching skill set, and you get so much exposure to different coaching styles. I was lucky. I got to work with Walter Norton Jr. He was kind of like our supervisor. But then in addition to that, I mean, I even have like other interns who I worked with who were absolutely phenomenal, who are now college strength coaches. So I did the Mike Boyle thing, and then like you and like most strength coaches, then I jumped around and did the whole grad assistant thing. And then, I've been kind of doing the independent contractor, small business owner, private thing for the last, it's been a while now, 15 years, something like that. So sorry, that's long winded, but that's kind of the story.
No, that's cool. That's what I wanted to hear anyway. And it's cool to see all the different things that you basically got presented to just because you're always active, you're always doing stuff, and you rarely never said no. So
yeah.
I mean, yeah. you never would have probably made like those connections without actually going through and just saying, yeah, I'll do it. Doesn't matter. Like, man, I could use this going down the road, or maybe I'll throw it away. Who cares? But
yeah, exactly. No. And I think there's something to be said for that. I knew that, if I really wanted to know how to do this stuff, that I needed to find the people who were doing it. And then when I was there, honestly, and I don't credit myself for this. I actually had two like literally world-class mentors help me along when I was in the Doyle program. Jake Anderson, who ended up being the Central College strength coach, the first Central College strength coach, full-time paid, and he built that program really from the ground up. And then Brian Dermody, who is also, but the point of me bringing those two names up. So when I went in there as a young intern, not really knowing anything, they kind of took me under their wing, and they kind of said, hey, this is a really special place where you can really learn a lot. So they said, make the most of it. And I remember Jake Anderson, he said, every day come in with a little notepad and just ask a lot of questions, and just, make sure you try to understand like why they're doing things, and you can't ask enough questions. So I literally took that to heart, and every single day I'd walk in there, I had my notepad, I had my pen, and I would literally just, like, why do you teach it this way? Why do you use these? Like the most simple, the most basic. And that's really what you learn from really going through the experience of like being in the presence of these kind of world-class mentors, which I absolutely consider Chris Doyle one of the best strength coaches who's ever been. Obviously there's a lot of like politics and talk around, him and this situation that's occurred over, recently. But at the end of the day, he's a world-class strength coach. He's a world-class strength coach. And he knows what he's doing in the weight room. The other stuff, I mean, we could talk about that. Unfortunately, that'd probably take us another whole podcast. And I'm not afraid to touch on it, but, maybe in like a few sentences, I'll just say this. My experience in the Doyle internship program was I'm a white guy from the Midwest. My experience was probably much different than other people's experience in that program. And so who am I to speak for anybody else other than myself? Chris Doyle became a mentor of mine, a friend of mine, I'd even say. It's a person who I would go in and I would routinely, visit and say hi. And I guess I'll say this. I'll say, at the end of the day, we have to absolutely address systemic racism. It's pervasive. It's real. It sucks. It hurts people. It hurts white people and dark people. It hurts everybody. It's a tragedy of our past. And at the end of the day, and I'm not calling Chris Doyle racist at all. What I'm saying is, I think all of us have biases built in. Some of those biases become outright racism, and some of those things can live in culture. And until we start to kind of address those things and recognize the reality of how much that hurts us as a society, I think we're going to keep wondering why things are the way they are. And it's going to continue to fester. So, and that's my way of saying, that Chris Doyle is a human. He grew up in Boston, in real Boston, in one of maybe the most racially what's the word? I don't know. There's the most racial tension of maybe all cities in the United States, and he grew up in an era, so, and that's not to justify or that's not to excuse, but to recognize that, I think number one, we need dialogue. Number two, we need to all look within. And we all, three, then we need to speak up and kind of say, hey, we need to change what we're doing.
No, that's a great point. And yeah, I don't have very much context on it, but yeah, I can completely understand those points you made too. And I know it's a prevalent issue no matter where you are. Yeah. What time period it is, what the coaching is, what the profession is, it doesn't matter. It's something that needs to be addressed for sure. And I know that the best thing to do is kind of to touch on it where you are and be able to do it within your own community and hopefully it outwardly spreads. But yeah, right. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and it's an unfortunate issue, but it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And I mean, I know regardless of the type of person he is or what there is, what happened, what didn't happen, you still learn a lot from it, and you took positives away from it. I mean, you're sitting there with your notepad still today. So right. You have that same philosophy still built in. And at the end of the day, you decipher the things that you want to take away from the situation, and you've become your own coach. And on even top of that, your resume has even grown more because you're a weightlifting club coach, you're an adjunct professor as well, business owner, everything. So you got a lot going on, and you took it in your own direction. So I think it's still a testament to what you did and the great mentors and people you had around you that got you to the position you are in now. Yeah. Now, I mean, I appreciate you, kind of highlighting that, because it's tricky. I think when you do try to march down your own path, sometimes maybe it's impossible not to wonder, am I doing this the right way? Or is there a certain, but for me, I think it's been necessary, because I think, I've been fueled by growth. I've been fueled by, I want to be able to honor my own commitment to who I am as a coach, honor my own, character, my own style. And so, and to be completely honest, you bring up the weightlifting club and kind of the experiences that I've had. I mean, that's really the beauty of these little, programs and niches that I've been able to develop, is that I can go in and I can kind of create a culture that is consistent with my own set of values, if that makes sense. No, that makes perfect sense. And I like that, because now you've you've had so much experience and you've had so much going on with your life that you've been able to develop your own philosophy and culture. And now you can pass that down, and you're in the mentorship role now. And
Yeah.
you work with a lot of youth athletes and everything with the weightlifting club. Will you touch on that a little bit too? Like how that kind of got started and how that came to fruition, and like you talked about, you're fueled by the growth. How's
Yeah.
like your weightlifting club, like Got Strength Gym's weightlifting club, like evolved since it first got started?
Yeah. So I started my gym out of my garage in my house. So I was in grad school, and I was still. This is like my last volunteer experience interning with Chris Doyle. That same semester, I started training some people in my garage because I had been doing some strongman competitively, and I had accumulated some tools. I had a rack, and I had some logs and stones, and just kind of fun stuff. And so I had a few athletes who would come over and start training with me, and essentially my wife got to a point where she's, we had a single car garage, and she's like, you can't keep bringing all these people over to the house, because word was spreading, and there was enough interest where, here every weekend I had like 7 or 8 kids kind of train, whatever. So she's like, get out of the garage, go do this somewhere else kind of thing. And so it kind of just gave me permission. I'm like, all right, well, fine, maybe this is the time. And sure enough, I found a warehouse, and I opened up a warehouse style gym. This was like back in 2005, I think. And so it was kind of like right at the infancy, kind of early days of like CrossFit, where not really, it wasn't a normal thing to be opening a gym in a warehouse. But it was perfect for me, and I knew that's where I needed to be. So opened up a little warehouse space and called it like a private sports performance center, and ended up doing that for a good, I think, 10 years. And that's where the weightlifting club developed and evolved. And I think basically my love of Olympic style weightlifting kind of grew from that experience. And the story there is, so I'm running this gym. My focus had been and was at the moment 100% athletic performance development, kind of using the Mike Boyle kind of methodology with my own little kind of like creative twists or whatever. But I remember one day, I started getting into snatch, clean and jerk because of Carl. Once again, he started competing before I did, while he was in Milwaukee, and he kind of turned me on to the barbell movements. And so I started throwing bars over my head and trying to kind of learn, teach myself. And then one day, my brother called me up, and he's like, dude, do you know that there's this guy from China who's up at UNI in Cedar Falls, and he's like a former Olympian and like not world record holder, but world champion weightlifter. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how is that person in Iowa? And he's like, no, he's there. He's like, he said Jed Smith, somehow had a connection and so I think literally the next day and when my brother tells me something, because he is my mentor, and he's always and he's never led me astray. He's always kind of helped me along my journey. I always I always touch base, and I always pay. And I really like what he tells me when he says something like that. I'm like, okay, yeah. He said, go, you got to find this guy. You got to find this guy, and you got to learn from him. And I'm like, all right, dude, I'm going to go learn from this guy. Make a long story short, I spent a couple of years, every chance I had, I would drive up there, see Coach Ma, developed a really close friendship with him. He helped me develop the club, build the club. He helped teach my athletes. I ended up basically trying to hire him every chance I had to come down and do clinics and workshops, and he does workshops around the globe right now. And it's a pretty penny to get into those workshops. I don't even want to say, like back in the day, this is before he was ever doing any workshops. I barely used to pay that guy enough money just for gas to come down. But when he would come down, I was always just blown away. I couldn't even tell you, like I had the previous, exercise physiology, biomechanics, the art of coaching, all that stuff already kind of, in my past, in my background. But then when he came along and started teaching snatch, clean and jerk, from what I kind of describe as like a Chinese, style or method, it just blew my mind. And in a nutshell, just to give you a little glimpse, all I can tell you is like when he walked in and he started going through, he's like, first of all, follow me. And he does this Chinese style dynamic warm up, and all the kids and everybody's moving around. And it's like, oh my, I've never seen and then he grabbed a PVC pipe. And when he started moving that PVC pipe around, and just moving it in like such a way. It was like slow motion and with such control, with such awareness, with such like every millimeter of that motion is like absolutely ingrained, downloaded, just that bloop. And it just kind of illustrated to me, like, people can say drugs, people can say, they have a huge population. They can say, well, it's because they're this type of, society or culture, that whatever. I'm telling you, man, if there's anything that I've really come to believe pretty strongly, is that it's the art of the practice. In weightlifting, more than any other maybe barbell sport, it's skill development. I mean, yeah, you have to be strong if you want to be like a champion, but you can't just be strong ever, period. You absolutely have to develop the skill and the movement quality. And then when you combine that with someone who's super strong, but it takes a while. It takes like this type of discipline that I think that not many people have, or patience, maybe. Maybe not discipline is the right word, because I feel like the discipline is easy for a lot of people. You just got to go to the gym and show up and try to throw weights over. But it's like holding the ego accountable. It's like being able to, like, okay, I might be strong enough to deadlift or squat. And I think this is a frequent, occurrence in a lot of like American weight rooms, because you get people that come to weightlifting with a background in training already. So they're pretty strong, and they kind of expect, and they have expectations on themselves. But it takes this humility of, I need to like totally be okay grabbing a PVC pipe or a wood dowel and literally just learning the movement. And so that's kind of like, what I love about weightlifting. And I do a lot more than just Olympic weightlifting coaching these days, but I think that relationship with Coach Ma just really, I don't know, is such a powerful experience in my journey.
No, I got I got turned on to Coach Ma from Carl too, and
Yeah.
I've been following him for a while, and you're right, like the discipline side of it, I think we put so much emphasis on it that, like, most people think, oh, that's all it takes, like just showing up and checking the boxes. But like you said, with how he coaches and how he moves with a dowel, it's purposeful intent. Like,
Yeah.
it's so ingrained in him, because he focuses so much on the movement, so much on the preparation, so much on the details of everything, that yeah, that part's discipline, but it's more than just showing up and being there. It's more
Yeah.
than just kind of going through the motions. It's constantly correcting and educating yourself and finding a better way, and kind of having that white belt mentality all the time, where you're
Yeah.
just always trying to be a little bit better, a little bit better. And that's
Totally.
cool.
Yeah, it is. It's intentionality in your practice. It's not just showing up to the practice and practicing. It's like intentionality in the practice. And that's not easy, because life has a lot of distractions, but boy, if you can somehow tap into that space where you can go in and really find this, I mean, it's kind of related to other, topics that are quite fascinating, like the zone and kind of the brain state that you're in. And I call it play, and I talk a lot about that, but it really is. It's how you meet that moment and how you meet that experience. And if you come to that experience with the openness and intention, in really just, and so it's so critical that someone, an athlete, like understands and can allow themselves to go to this place of like, my movement quality matters. My movement quality matters whether I have a barbell loaded with, 100 kilos, or I have an empty bar. The movement quality. And I always just say, it's one of those things, like movements get downloaded onto the hard drive that is your nervous system. I mean, that's kind of how it works. And it's like, and if you repeatedly shoot free throws a certain way, to go back and unlearn is really tricky. So I always say to my athletes, I said, practice doesn't make perfect. That's not true. That's from a human physiology, movement perspective, motor patternings perspective. Practice makes permanent. It leaves permanent traces, in the nervous system, and how the brain communicates to the motor units, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so the Coach Ma mentorship was absolutely vital, and And to this day, we stay in contact. And I was lucky in 2010. I was able to travel to China with him and spent 2 weeks in China. I took one of my younger youth athletes, kid who was a two-time national champion youth weightlifter, and his parents let him travel to China with me. And so I got to go to China and spend a week living in what's called a sports school, which is like youth age, school age kids, and kind of learn about like the process of like how kids get to that school, like. And then I got to sit there and watch them train, talk to the coaches, train with them. And then the second week we were there, we went to Beijing Sports University, which is one of the Chinese national training bases. And while we were there, we were watching people just like, freaky, like 69 kilo lifters snatching, 140 with pretty like ease, like seeing things that you're just like, wow. I mean, it just solidified like the things that I thought I was picking up from Coach Ma. And I'm like, yeah, this is it. Now I'm literally witnessing it, so.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. I've had a few friends that have gone over to China and worked within like getting ready for the Beijing Olympics or just working with their national team in various different like positions. Yeah. And they've said the same thing, like just the way they go about it and the preparation and everything they kind of get ready for the athletes and try to set up for them to be successful is just completely mind numbing. It's the intent that they have. And it's pretty cool to see that and be able to take someone over and get to experience it firsthand. Cause at the end of the day, like when you're talking with Coach Ma, it's still it's his version of what he thinks it is. And for you to go see it firsthand is really cool. Cause I know it definitely impacted the athlete you took over with you, but also probably how you came back and kind of went approaching your weightlifting club. So kind of how has the philosophy changed for you, like for training weightlifting? Because I know that is one thing that you're still pretty predominantly focused on, but especially from the youth side of it, you talked about play and like all the sports and everything you played growing up. Like, how do you keep weightlifting? Like maybe it's a cultural thing in America. How do you keep weightlifting still fun and recreational and not like what most people would see as Chinese, like Olympic lifting or sport as like already a job for like 10-year-olds? How do you keep it fun? How do you keep them engaged and like wanting to do it past high school, past college, or maybe professionally, or maybe never again?
Sure. Boy, that's oh man, that could take you down a lot of different paths. But let me just tackle that whole like how do you keep it fun and interesting and the whole motivation aspect of it. I think that's first of all super important. I think that I've been aware that the relationship that can be established between training and young people and how they relate to that experience is so important. It established, because that's what I've kind of like I've kind of like developed this niche in working with youth athletes. And so when I say youth athletes, I'm primarily talking about, so like 90% of the people who I work with are middle school, high school, and then I get some college. But for the most part, and then I have a handful of adults, but for the last 12 years, probably 90% I would say are youth. So that's not lost on me, and just the fact that I can impact how someone relates to their body, to movement, to nutrition and food, and all of these things that are involved in kind of like this, what I call like a high performance lifestyle. I'm very aware of it and I take it very serious. And so what I try to do, first of all, I practice. I'm making sure that that I'm doing the things that I need to do, so that when I show up as the coach, that I'm relating or modeling. That's probably the better word. I'm modeling the relationship that I hope that they're able to develop. And that's one of, I absolutely am fascinated by the human body. I'm absolutely fascinated by training. I really enjoy the process of training. movement should be intrinsically enjoyable. I mean, every human is brought into the world with a downloaded. It's literally in our DNA. It's in our genetic blueprint that we want to move and we want to explore. We want to exercise the capacities that we have been given. By whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter where you say it's from. Evolution say it's from some other place. It doesn't matter. Every single human baby and even mammal is brought into the world wanting to exercise these capacities. And one of those capacities is the capacity to move. We want to learn things. We want to know, what is this? What does that feel like? What does this taste like? What does this sound? What is that? How does this person relate to me? How do I move? Oh, I can control these things. Whoa, so that's autumn. And we're rewarded by that, by brain chemicals, because that's valuable for us and essential for us to survive and to thrive and to pass on our genes and all that. So movement by nature is inherently pleasurable. I think, unfortunately, what can happen, though, is that people can either not be exposed to movement cultures, weight rooms, sports, and have an experience that helps facilitate the continued development and growth of that relationship, if that makes sense. I think that some young people either get forced too strongly, like it's not their desire, want, or wish, but other people's dream for them, or want or desire, or wish, and they kind of get forced and pushed, and I've seen that play out where, young people had like a dad who was a star football player, and so it was expected that, and sometimes they can overcome that and develop a healthy relationship, but a lot of times the kids resent it and resist it, and would be better served by having someone who helped facilitate their own growth and development. And so, the whole thing with like weightlifting, I think there is maybe this perception that weightlifting can become like boring and monotonous because it's literally just snatch, clean, and jerk. But if you stop and take a step back and you really start to analyze and kind of like look at like how complex. So when I was in grad school, one of the first courses I had to take was a biomechanics course. And in that biomechanics course, one of the assignments I remember was like, pick a sporting movement, and then just like analyze it from a biomechanical perspective, like joint range of motions, angles, velocity of rotation, and all these things. And so I'm thinking, I'll just do a snatch. Okay. And this is young, naive, kind of like not really having all the perspective I have now. I'm like, just do a snatch. Well, how complicated does that become? It becomes very complicated very quick when you start to really look at, from a Jack Rummels type of like, we're going to 3D analyze joint range of motion and acceleration forces and all these things. You're like, okay, so the movements themselves are super complex. It's just that can we get people to a space where they can appreciate that complexity and not get overwhelmed by it and not get bored with it. And if you can approach it that way, then I think it's like almost just by nature that it's going to keep pulling you back, because you're never going to master, just like you're never going to master golf, right? Because golf, it's like, 1 degree of rotation of that club head and that thing's going off into the fairway way over here. I always say weightlifting is basically just golf. It's like, it's so nuanced, but you have to be strong, and even in golf you do, but it's like that ability to control. And then you're asking someone to lift enormous amounts of weights with that amount of control. I mean, it's the most, to me, it's amazing. It's wonderful. And I hope that kind of passion that I have and I've been taking a little break from competitive weightlifting, and my club has not even been allowed to train because we're through our Parks and Recs program. And so that facility has been shut down during the pandemic, and they have not opened yet. And it's probably still another couple months away. So I've been taking this as an opportunity, almost like as an off season. And that's what I've been encouraging my lifters to do. But, my hope is that as soon as we're back in there, everybody's feeling, a little bit, fresh and a little bit ready to kind of like energized to get back in there. And so I hope that I can keep that type of relationship with weightlifting because it does fuel me. Not that I mean, I still have that with speed and agility too. I absolutely love speed and agility. I love teaching running mechanics, linear POW, lateral POW, and I do that just as hard and just as great as I do weightlifting. But the weightlifting is cool for me because that's kind of my outlet too, because it's my kind of competitive, where I get to go in and experience it and be an athlete just like the rest of the people who come to the club. Okay.
That's awesome. No, I like what you said about that stuff, because that's basically the format for the show, like practicing all this stuff and then finding that relationship so that you can help facilitate those things for your athletes. And it's cool to hear. And I think that what most people end up doing is they try to make weightlifting so mechanical. Like it's, hey, we do this on this day, you do it this many times, you do it like at this intensity, and then it just becomes monotonous and boring. And I think a lot what you said in the very beginning when we talked about like how you first got started and your choice, like you had the freedom of choice to pick what you wanted to do and try stuff out, and you weren't force fed anything. And you do that exact same thing now with your athletes. Like I know that it's park rect, like how it's kind of structured. So people come to you because they want to do it or they're interested in doing it. So they already have that freedom of choice to come into. Most people are not, their parents aren't weightlifters being forced into weightlifting. So it's already new. It's kind of novel to them. So it's exciting, or maybe it's completely contraindicating of what their dad playing football. So this is their way to rebel. But it's a good approach to kind of take. And I definitely think like, even like myself at the college level or professional level, like you could take a lot away from what youth coaches are doing. Like I know you're not pigeonholed to just that athlete or that age range, but what you guys do and what you specifically do, like that stuff shouldn't go away when we get to a higher level, because it's just going to burn them out and they're going to get injuries, or they're not going to want to be involved in anymore. They're not going to have the same passion that they have when they first started. And I think the people that stay in it forever and in some way, shape or form, just recreationally or competitive, like that passion still kind of burns the same as day one.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said it like that. Cause that really is for me, that's been a goal that I've always known in the back of my mind, but I don't necessarily share it because it's just kind of like my goal. But my want, my wish, my hope is for all my athletes. It's just like my children. I hope that they can develop a relationship that will last a lifetime, because I view the experience as so much more than just what it is at that moment. It really is this thing that can allow people to go about their lives and have a little bit more control and decision making power, because they understand the principles that kind of can help direct their ship. That so it's like eating and learning about nutrition and how we can fuel the body and the brain and the mind, and how it helps recovery and give energy and all that stuff. That's not a sports performance thing. That's a life performance thing. And so it's never lost on me. And I hope that I'm doing a service by being aware of this relationship myself, and then trying to proactively encourage that relationship building, where it's a positive relationship to training, a positive relationship to how I feed and fuel my body. Because there's so much of this, I have to eat this number of calories or this amount of nutrients. And so even the way I approach trying to teach nutrition is like, there's no good or bad. There's no good or bad. This food is inherently, those are just words we use, right? There's nothing that says that this food is bad or this food is good. Those are emotional terms, right? So I always just like try to teach young people when it comes to nutrition. First of all, you need to eat. You need to eat a lot. You need to fuel. If you're an athlete and you're training a lot, you need more calories than you even know. And then when it comes down to like food selection, it's like, to get a little bit on a tangent here, but I think this makes sense. Choose foods that are of high quality nutrition, that have the most nutrition possible, But then at the end of the day too, don't be afraid to eat certain foods. Don't vilify them or feel guilty. It's like, choose foods that are, going to fuel your body and give you energy and allow you to recover, because that's important to you. But then also be able to enjoy your relationship with food, because food is inherently pleasurable because it helps us survive. So just kind of understanding those dynamics, those kind of psychological. So I always go back to, like, strength coaches are like literally the intersection of like art and science. My mom's an artist, my dad's a doctor. So of course I'm going to be a strength coach, right? So I literally have kind of like this, I don't know, this understanding that there's the science and the physiology and the biomechanics and the human movement and the brain and the neurons and, muscles. But then in addition to that, there's this beautiful art of how you create a program and teach things and speak to people, the relationships you form. And so it really is that whole biopsychosocial, right? If you forget any one of those three, that kind of trifecta of biological, right, psychological, and then social, right? That's really the key element to human behavior, to understanding how and why people do things. And so, as coaches, we have a lot of power over the culture that we build, we want to design. And I think when we become aware of these things, then we can help build a culture that's healthy, supportive, and really helps build people up, as opposed to having to create a culture of like accountability through like ultra discipline, because when you're working with young people, just to be completely frank, you start pulling the whole like, show up on time or else, or blah, blah, in like they're like, okay, yeah, see you later. Like, I don't have to be here, so you don't have a choice but to find a better way. And it's always a better way, if it's, and I understand that, the dynamics of a collegiate environment is different than in a high school. But I think that there's a lot that can be learned. Like you mentioned it too. I think a lot can be learned from how we approach training with youth. And my goal is always to send my kids who train with me off into their collegiate experience being just enthusiastic. I mean, so Bo Bauer's a kid who trained with me at West Branch. He started when he was a kid at, I don't know, probably 10 years old. And he was like a wiry, super energetic, bouncing off the walls, just like high energy kid. And his parents are like, here, take our son, because we don't know what to do with him at home, because he's, whatever, bouncing off the walls. Well, make a long story short, after he went through the program as a freshman, he was recruited to play football at Iowa, and he was able to go into that program already prepared to know how to do hang cleans, to know how to squat to depth, to know how to, just he had a body that had been fairly well balanced because it wasn't so heavy on one movement pattern. It was a really kind of like a functional, whatever, Mike Boyle-ish, So and when a kid can go in, to that environment, to the next level, and already kind of have these like foundational fundamental principles already established, then I think it gives them such an advantage. And sure enough, as a freshman linebacker here, he's starting for the University of Iowa football program, so, in my estimation, I don't know, that's just one example, but I mean, I've had enough kids over the years to be able to say, okay, well, there's pretty good evidence that, this stuff works fairly well. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah, I would say it works pretty well. And it's a testament to what you do. And like you talked about the humility of it, like everything you're doing is athlete centered. It's athlete focused. It's all encompassing. So when you have someone like that go through like your system and they're just progressing, and they know their ultimate goal is like, they want to go to college. They want to play football. Like, you're not trying to peak them when they're in high school. You're not trying to peak them when they're a youth. Exactly. Because there's so much more that yes. they have as a goal for themselves. So for you to kind of take that away and try to be the coach that gave them that PR, or the coach that like peaked them, like they're not going to achieve what they wanted to do. And it's a selfish way to do it. And unfortunately, that's what some people see. And now working with like my baseball guys, especially here, I see it more and more, because I get a lot of guys that end up getting drafted, and I only see them sometimes maybe for 3 years, or if they're a transfer, maybe just for one.
Sure.
And I might see some guys for four. It just depends. But for me, like their goals are so much more lofty than just being successful in college. They want to take a shot at the big leagues and like be professionals. And
Yeah.
that might extend their career for 2 years, 1 year, 15. You never
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
what I do with them is I have to think long term, and
Yeah.
it makes me appreciate what like you and other youth coaches do, because now I'm not the end of the road. I'm somewhere in the middle. And then I try to treat that with all my athletes now, because like you said, it's life performance. So what I'm doing with them, I don't want it to be just solely centered around sport, and everything we do is, all right, this is your sport, let's get better at your sport, let's do this. I
Right.
want you to appreciate movement, appreciate like nutrition. I want you to appreciate like all the things you develop from it, so that you can be a better person. That makes you a better athlete. That makes you a better high performer if you're a better human first. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cool to hear.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what goes along with that too is that then people start to take some ownership of their training, and start to really appreciate how their body works too. And then when you're able to achieve that type of state, then I think then you're really working together collaboratively, coach athlete. Then it's like because I feel like it's easy to fall victim to this whole like it's this type of relationship where it's like I tell you you have to do kind of thing, but we all know from experience that there's nothing better, more powerful, more productive than an athlete and a coach who really just get that we are a team working together, and we have as coaches a little bit more perspective, maybe a little bit more insight, so we can kind of help our athletes understand that this is all a process, it's all a journey, there is no destination here. It's not it's not what we do today, it's what we set you up kind of for tomorrow. That doesn't mean we don't train heavy, and honestly, I've trained my young athletes fairly heavy from early stages. Not to say I haven't made mistakes, because I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. So I've made a hell of a lot of mistakes. And I look at some of the things that I've done in the past. I'm like, would I do that now? I don't know. I tend to probably be even more of a technique oriented, like movement really matters. And that was also planted in my brain I remember Mike Boyle saying that all the time when I was out in Boston. Movement matters. At the end of the day, strength is a component of movement, but like when you lose sight of like the whole like movement is kind of like the overarching umbrella, then I think we can get in trouble. But yeah, I think what you said, dude, that's super powerful in being able to appreciate kind of where we're at with these athletes along their continuum, along their timeline, because it's so easy to allow our egos to direct what we do.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, if you don't look back on your program from a year ago and cringe,
Yeah.
or just question stuff,
Yeah.
then you should probably change professions, or you should
Yeah.
you should find a job that maybe in accounting, where the numbers are just number one never changes from number one. And that's perfectly fine if you're okay with that. But but you should advance, and you should always be kind of working on your craft and trying to get the best product forward. And I try not to look back, but I definitely need to more and see, because there are some things that I should have never done, and I felt like I never should have been allowed to do. But I like when you talk about the timeline and like the continuum for the athletes, like what's really important to you when it comes to like training your athletes? Like what kind of defines success for you within their program, whether they're on the weightlifting club team, or if they're just coming in for the first time? Like what are you trying to really accomplish with them more than anything? Like maybe not even athletically, or like on the actual long-term like athletic development plan. Like what are the key things to you that kind of define someone being successful in your program?
Sure. Yeah. That's an interesting question, man. I think if my athletes make progress in their ability to understand their own body, how it functions, how it works, I think that's a huge goal of mine. Just like I feel like I got really lucky in my experiences, in that, like, I wasn't necessarily a huge reader, I wasn't like a huge kind of like I need to learn everything type of person. I mean, I was curious, but I was in school and I was busy and I was running businesses. But I tell you what, when I met Chris Doyle, he really, really impressed upon me that, like, if you want to do this profession, you absolutely need to be a obsessive compulsive reader, and so I slowly kind of, like, over the years started just like into books, and kind of like learn. And so I think I came out on the other side of that with this like understanding and appreciation that, my goals with young people, when I work with young people, are I want to make them the best damn athlete that they can be, for sure. But at the end of the day, it's really like, I want to build them up as a human so that they can become that athlete that they wish to be. There's no shortcuts. Like, you can't like ignore really important, like attributes and characteristics of like how people think of themselves and how they relate to the activities and the sports that they're doing. And I have just always found that if you start there, you start by empowering and allowing, younger people to believe in themselves. But and just a quick kind of like story about what I'm trying to communicate is, like, I've had so many young people over the years who found themselves in the weight room. So I'm referring more to like when I was at West Branch. So I was the high school strength coach for 12 years, right? So I was an independent contractor, but the contract was that I was there every single day. I was there morning and afternoon. I knew every single kid in all the middle school, all the high school. I was running every single team. I was the head dude there. It was my place. And so, and when I was in that environment, I can't tell you how many times I had kids come in to the weight room who were probably labeled non-athletes, or maybe they were the kids who weren't like necessarily like the ones that were expected to excel, or the ones who were treated like they were the going to be the starters or the role players. I can't tell you how. I mean, the number of like of subjects, of people, of humans, of young athletes that I've worked with, who the weight room literally just gave them like, yeah, like all I have to do is really put in the time, the energy, have this like, positive relationship, and it changes people. I mean, that's my point, is that when you see that process unfold and you see like how it helps people just self-regulate and become a better version of who they are, empower them to do things in their lives, then it just becomes like, okay, yeah, you start to get it. It starts to become like obvious. And I think that, to answer your question, or to go back to your kind of initial question, that for me has become primary. And I've always said that, like, I'm a kind of crazy, like my goal initially when I was an intern for Chris Doyle, like in my mind, I said, I'm going to be the next Chris Doyle. I'm going to be the best college strength coach that I can be. And I'm going to and then eventually when I went out to Boston, I was like, well, wow, I really like kids. I really just have this relationship, this connection with young people. It just seems to be a very natural, authentic. And so then kind of when I was able to like get into my position that I was in West Branch and what I'm in now, I think that I can really call upon that the beauty of that relationship. So that's kind of like my answer to that question.
No, I like it. And I think I was listening to Joel Smith talk the other day, and he was kind of going through like he had a similar kind of like pyramid structured of how he like describes movement, and the foundation base is like starting from just a human element, and then it builds to an athlete element, and then it builds to like a specialist. And
Yes, that's good.
and that definitely like describes like how I think the approach should be. And we often try to skip right ahead to the athlete element, and then
Yeah,
we're loading dysfunctional movements, or like
yeah,
even outside of movement and stuff, we're treating them as athletes first rather than humans first. And
yeah,
it's cool to see it from the youth perspective, because like you said, you're getting some people that would come in and not be labeled as athletes or like on a team or something, and they might be just doing like PE, like physical education, as a class.
yeah.
So you want them to have the human element. You want to talk to them like a person, and like not as a baseball athlete, as a soccer athlete. Like
Yes,
you
that's
are your name, you're your person. It's different.
yeah. Okay, so that's what you just said. I really, really like how you kind of just laid that out. I think that that human foundation, that human element is so critical, because otherwise you get kids who come in a high school weight room and they're treated like they're, and I saw it at our high school. I had, because there's sport coaches who try to, and they mean well, try to like take some like control of like the training and try to steer. And so you'll have these kids coming in the weight room and they're doing like, a bunch of real like specific isolation stuff, because they're overhead throwers, which is part of the protocol. But at the end of the day, they haven't even put the foundation together. They haven't even, addressed the human, so, and especially when you're talking about young kids, I mean, it's all about that, foundational movement patterns, fundamental. I mean, you could even go as far as saying like we have like primal movement patterns that are like, crawling and just manipulating your body. And if kids aren't allowed to, explore movement enough when they're young, you absolutely are obligated as a coach to take them through that process, because that is key to their development. And so, I mean, and that's one of the favorite things that I ever started, at West Branch. I tried to always, I always tried to honor my creativity and try to always honor kind of like, okay, what am I seeing? What, instead of just tradition and just kind of doing, what typically gets done, I tried to really be, and I took a Mike Boyle kind of blueprint. It really was, we pair an explosive movement with a torso movement, and then we have two more, strength pairs. And I always think of things in terms of Mike Boyle, like pressing, pulling, hinging, squatting, single leg, unilateral rotation, diagonal, and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm like, always, I always was willing and aware that I wanted to watch kids move. I wanted to watch kids move, and then see what my mind comes up with, what kind of patterns, what do I. And so one of the things that I did was I would take every Wednesday morning, we would go up into the wrestling room, and I would take all these out of season non-wrestlers, these are non-wrestlers, and we just do all these different kind of calisthenics and different like tumbling drills and, dynamic warm-ups and movement, like crawling, bear crawls, log rolls, handstand holds, and all these things. And I tell you, that's one of the most valuable things that you can do with young people. That unfortunately, I don't know, some PE classes I think are failing in regards to movement. I think that they have become hyper focused on like the whole conditioning, cardiovascular, and which is, an element. But at the end of the day, it's like people who can move well and have this relationship to their bodies, they're going to be the ones that continue to train, enjoy the process of training, and probably participate in more active lifestyles when they're not competitive athletes anyway. So it's kind of like you give them this gift that they can take with them until they're in the ground.
No, that's a great point. And I see that specifically. Like I have a wrestling team here, and just seeing them move, seeing them warm up and stuff, like you forget, you lose sight of that stuff, and how important it is.
Yeah.
And okay, so we go in the weight room and we're gonna like barbell push press today. It's like, well, can you even like stand on your hands like with a wall supported just for a
And
second?
right. And lock out fully and express full range of motion in the
Yeah.
joint. Exactly. Yeah.
It's the same thing, but it's so different. But being able to control your body in that position, being
Yeah.
able to roll, being able to stand up properly outside of that, Like
Yeah.
that stuff goes missing. And I definitely, I can see it from my athletes coming in that it's a wasted, it's lost on them completely from their youth, from their high school. Like it's not there anymore. And I don't know where the fault of it all kind of like lies, but
Yeah.
in youth coaching and stuff, like you can see the trickle effect of what happens when they're now 18, 22, not knowing how to do that. And you don't know what could be, like what their athletic potential could have been
Right.
if that was ingrained into their foundation. So I
Yeah.
guess this one's a loaded question again too,
Yeah.
but since you're in the position you're in, what advice would you give, like maybe to either a parent or a younger athlete looking to find like a coach, either maybe not specifically for like sports performance or
Yeah.
like Olympic weightlifting as like a club? What would you kind of say are like the key indicators or characteristics, or maybe even just like bullet points that they emphasize when you're there looking for someone to like mentor and facilitate like some of this process as a youth, if they don't have it or they don't want to use their middle school or high school coach?
Right. Right. Boy. Yeah. It's tricky because I'm a parent of 8-year-old twins, and so I'm aware that there are a lot of there are a lot of opportunities for kids these days. This is outside of pandemic times, that the opportunities have been limited over the last whatever lately, but there are a lot of opportunities. You have gymnastics, you have tumbling, you have youth sports, you have traveling teams, you have you name it. So for me, I think just really doing your homework as a parent, or someone who is trying to help a person find their calling and develop this positive relationship that we've been discussing. I think just getting to know the coaches and trying to like kind of feel them out, and what is their what is their what is their kind of personal motto, what is their culture, I guess, of so my kids kind of like gymnastics, and if I step into a gymnastics gym, it's pretty obvious, I think, right off the bat, are these coaches solely focused on performance outcomes, or can they kind of see the whole, like, it's about the journey, and understand that, like, if you get kids to buy into this journey, kids love to move, especially like in a gymnastics, or even at wrestling. Any movement honestly can be enjoyable. It really is just how you introduce, and how you, and I think that's a skill set that sometimes is underappreciated. No, not sometimes, is underappreciated in our culture. And I think, like we kind of started off this conversation saying, I think that if we can kind of tap into youth coaches who have experience in developing that relationship, we need to learn from them. We need to like look at, okay, well, what are they doing? And I don't know if I have any secrets or anything that I can share with you, other than I just know that how I relate to weightlifting and how I relate to the weight room has a direct impact on how my athletes relate. So I've always been aware that, like, I want to make sure that I'm, what do you say? Like, I'm taking care of my relationship with the sport. Like, because if I develop like I don't want to do weightlifting, I don't enjoy snatch, clean, and jerk, then I think my athletes at some point will feel that, know that, because my relationship with it up to this point, at least, has been completely authentic, and I enjoy doing it as much as I enjoy coaching it. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think just trying to really gauge, like, okay, who are these people who are teaching and coaching my kids and these young people, and do they have the right attitude and relationship that I want to encourage in my children.
No, you definitely answer the question. And I think the last point you made too, like like as a coach, like I'm not a parent, but thinking of it from like that parent aspect, like what would their parents say about me as a coach? Like, do they trust me with their kids or their young adults? Like that's very important. And the
Yeah.
authenticity of it, and like is are there goals? Is the culture of what they're doing, does it line up with what they do and what they say, and the atmosphere that they're stepping into? And
Yeah.
if that's in line, then that's probably a good place for them to be in. And yeah, people change and people evolve, but if your first impression of that is that, and what the other athletes are doing, like that's kind of seems to translate because they're a conductor for what the coach is doing, and
Yes.
you could see it in them,
Yeah.
then you're probably in the right place. And that's a good testament to kind of see what the people coming out of it look like, because
Yeah.
they're going to be the ultimate decider of if it's worthwhile or if this is the right place to be at.
Yeah, totally. And you just reminded me of something. I completely agree. And you made me think of this. I hadn't thought this thought in a while, but yeah, that was one of the things that I kind of knew when I went into creating the West Branch Strength and Conditioning program, because before I arrived, they didn't have a program. There was nothing. They had like a closet with some barbells and it was a mess. And so there was no program. There was no coach. There was no nothing. And so when I went in, I kind of was able to just understand that I can build this culture however I want to build this culture. I really had that empowerment. And it wasn't always easy. And I had some sport coaches who really tried to make my life miserable for a while. But at the end of the day, I think I really succeeded because I got to a place where I had enough kids who carried that same torch that I had, who were just as excited, and they infected the rest of these teams to the point where, I mean, I literally, there were moments when I was at West Branch where we had every single female athlete, every single male athlete in any sport in the weight room on a regular basis. Not all of them always wanted to be there, but before I arrived at West Branch, there wasn't a single female up there training in that weight room. And by the time I left, every single female sport in the school was required to be part of the strength and conditioning process. And so, and that was this, it wasn't because I was going in there and I was like, this has to be done, but like with a hammer or fist. It was because I had kids who slowly, and then they became the deliverer of the message that, hey, dude, this is actually great and we can all do it together. And then all of a sudden you get a whole team in there. And when a whole team is in there and they're all feeling like empowered, and it's just such a, I don't even know, it's like such a growth opportunity, and such like a wonderful experience to be part of. And when I look back, I ended up having to leave that position at West Branch because the politics honestly got to me. I hate to say it, but it was time. And my wife was the one who was just like, you did everything you absolutely could for that place. You gave yourself to them fully, authentically. And at the end of the day, it got to a point where it was sucking so much of my energy to try and, just deal with, like I said, the politics and I had kids, and, I was trying to be a dad, and I was a dad. I was a stay-at-home dad and strength coach. I'd go, 5 a.m. to whatever, and then I'd come home and be a dad all day, and then I go back to work. But whatever, eventually it got to a point where I was like, you know what? It's time for me to move on, because I'm losing myself. I'm starting to lose part of like who I am. And that's not healthy.
No, yeah, that's when it comes to that point, that's the time that, like, to part ways. And
Yeah.
and if you're not in a good place yourself, and you're not helping yourself and improving, and you don't feel like that passion, or you don't feel that drive, or you feel like you don't have the right energy, then
Yeah.
it's going to translate over to the athletes you work with. You're
Yeah.
going to be resentful. They're going to notice things, and
Yes.
even if you don't outwardly say it, like, they can
Yes.
feel that energy. So
yeah, and it's totally true. It's totally true. Yep.
yeah. But like you said, when you got all the female athletes to like come in, like, one of my old bosses has told me this, like, the power's in the players. Like, it doesn't matter if the sport coaches, like, especially in the college level, like, they're based off wins and losses. I mean, some high schools are the same way, but if the sport coach doesn't care about you, they don't like what you do,
Yeah.
admin doesn't like what you do, or
Yeah.
other coaches don't like what you do, athletic trainers, doesn't matter. If the
Yeah.
players are on your side, like
Yeah.
you have more power than anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's cool to see, because you're not trying to manipulate them or anything. You're just
No.
you're in a position, and they appreciate what you do, and you're a
Yeah.
mentor to them, and they want to emulate those things, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
The big thing, like, I've always taken away, like, and I can easily say from like every day working with your brother Carl, like, it was a blast. Like, training was always fun. Like,
Yeah.
coaching was always competitive and exciting. And
Yeah.
the one thing that I always thought about, like, from the conversations that I had with him, or like those brief interactions, or even like the first time I asked him, like, I was like, what is this got strength sticker on the back of your car? And and the one thing I always thought about, like, when it came to you two, was just like the passion you guys both had. So, like, I know this one could be a long-winded one as well, which I'm completely fine with. But what kind of fuels your passion for coaching, for teaching, for training, for performance? Like, why choose that path?
Yeah. Shoot. I don't know. I don't know that I've ever really stopped to like analyze too much, but I can say that, like, having my brother as a role model, and kind of introduce me to it, and then it being something that I chose freely and became just fascinated by. I think that as a youngster, that I think I had a very active mind and had a lot of energy and had a big heart. I always loved people, and so I just think, like, my characteristics just lent themselves to wanting to be a coach. I think honestly, way before I ever knew strength and conditioning was in my future, I had all kind of, like, in my mind already, like, thought I want to be a coach, and I credit a few people, but in particular one. I had a youth basketball coach, a guy named Troy Rude, who was became a mentor of mine, and I was just a youngster. I think I was just a middle schooler at the time, but as a coach, as a basketball coach, it was a traveling team. He made it so much fun, and he had so much passion and so much enthusiasm. I think when he was our coach, he was just like a senior in high school, or maybe just fresh out of high school, a freshman in college or something like that. But he worked us. He absolutely worked us. Like, we would practice so hard and we would run so aggressively. But every single person on that team absolutely loved it. And I just knew, kind of from that experience and a few other experiences in sports and with coaches, that, yeah, I really like that type of relationship. It just seems very genuine, very authentic. And I've always been a kid. I've always been a kid at heart, and so I relate well to children and to young people. And so I don't know if that's exactly where my passion comes from, but I know that it feels very authentic to be doing what I do. It feels very, very natural, and it feels like I'm like living my purpose in a weird kind of, like, metaphysical kind of, like, I guess I'm very, 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 very fortunate in that I've had the experiences that I've had, and I think that it is kind of this natural evolution of when you've had people who have impacted you that profoundly and shown you that type of beauty within yourself, that you want to share that with others and you want to help them find that, and so, and then just the passion also just comes from an innate curiosity and love of learning. I mean, I'm to this day, I mean, strength and conditioning has taken me, like, all over the damn place, all over the world, physically, in like the real world. And then inside my mind, it's taken me, the last, 8 years have been spent in the world of, like, neuroscience and understanding emotions and the evolved brain. And, to the point where, like, I want to write a book. And so anyways, I think it just allows me to continue to explore ideas and explore concepts. And that keeps me hungry and keeps it fun and interesting and yeah, and in love with what I do.
That's great. Yeah, the authenticity of it, and finding your passion and being able to pass it on and share it with other people. It's a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah.
And I would say that you found exactly kind of like your calling, if you want to like term it as that. But
Yeah.
the curiosity and everything to like that what you have to continue to want to learn and explore new stuff. Like, I know that you've been involved in a lot of sports, and you've like from action sports, from like just adventure stuff, and from traditional strength sports and everything. What have you been kind of exploring lately, or what's been your kick? I don't know how much snow you're getting out in Iowa, but what's
Yeah.
uh what's kind of been the thing that's driving you, I guess, like movement wise and physically? Oh, there you go.
It's still white. It's so it just warmed up yesterday, and things are starting to melt. But we have a ton of snow, and so it's funny you asked that, because I just recently have got my snowboard back out. I really had not had the time. When you're raising twins and trying to work at the same time, life gets busy. And so, I've been and I've always juggled. Like, I've been an adjunct professor. I've been a gym owner, like a physical gym owner, and then I've been an independent contractor where I run speed and agility camps at different places in town. So I've always juggled a bunch of different stuff. But just recently, I found enough space to go snowboarding, get my snowboard out, start waxing it. And my kids are kind of at that age where they're at least trying or willing to go out and kind of try. They did the ski. Oh, you there?
Yeah.
Oh, so hold on. I got a call coming. Let me decline that. Sorry about that. You still there?
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Anyways, and so for me, I think, getting back to mountain biking and snowboarding both over the last couple of years, it's kind of where, I did that when I was young, but really strength coaches, as you know, to get into the profession, you kind of have to just like, whatever, put your head down and kind of forget about a lot of the things that you used to do as leisure activities. It's time consuming, man. It's an investment. And so I was willing to do that for a long time, but fortunately over the last few years, I've started to find, some space to kind of get back to some things that I enjoy doing. But, I'm honestly right now really itching to get back to my weightlifting club. I just, it's like since the first week of the pandemic, it shut down. And like I said, it's through Iowa City Parks and Recs. And so, and that's one of those things where I probably didn't even appreciate and recognize how important that was for me, for like my just mental and, whatever, it's a place where I think I was able to go and get like regular doses of like almost like movement therapy, that now that it's not there, I'm having to like, which isn't a bad thing, but now I'm snowboarding and I'm getting on my bike and I'm doing more rock climbing, and which is stuff all I really enjoy, but I actually am really kind of missing the bar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're adaptable. So when, I mean, Iowa weather is crazy. So when there's snow, you got to go snowboarding.
Yes.
When there's no snow, maybe you can go biking. And
yes,
when it's clear, maybe you can play some basketball, but pond freezes over, you could probably play hockey too. So
yeah, and that's kind of my stance. That's kind of my approach, is I try to be like a movement generalist. I'm not trying to set, for a while I was doing competitive strongman, like when I was, a young intern, and I was lifting with Brian Dermody, and then kind of, phased out of that after like 4 or 5 years. And then more into Olympic weightlifting, and really got into that and really pushed that for a while. But like you said, I think being adaptable and flexible has really been helpful during the pandemic, because you're just limited, and for me, I just knew outside was important. And so that's kind of what I've been doing, is just anytime I can, I try to get outside and just free the mind, be in nature, and if I can do it with something that's physically active, I really enjoy doing that. And so my newest thing, Nick, is I'm actually planning a little like bike here. So I'll turn this around here. So I'm working on this guy right now. This is like my touring bike.
Oh.
I have a downhill mountain bike that's like sitting up here. This is kind of like my, if I go to a place where I just want to bomb downhill, that's the bike. But this one right here, I bought used online for $50, just the frame. And so I've been building it out over the winter. And so I just put the racks on it, and I got to put my bottom bracket and cranks back on. But this sucker is going to take me on some adventures, because I have this itch to just kind of do some bike touring, bike adventures. So we'll see.
That's cool. Yeah, all the sports kind of come full circle now, because now you're going back a little bit to where your roots came from. And I try to do that, like, especially when I go from one weight room to the other. I haven't done it in a while. I used to I pull my skateboard out from under my desk and I'll go skate over to the other facility to kind of break it up. But I gotta bust it back out again too. It's just, it gets so busy, but that's awesome to hear. And to kind of keep those things in and be a generalist so that you can be adaptable and do anything that kind of calls like your attention to it. So, hey, so we end the show here with, like any good training session, with a good finisher. So I got 4 quarters for you, 4 questions, and then maybe a little bit of overtime at the end. So what do you say? You ready to go?
Yep.
All right, take your time with them, or you can fire them off rapid fire. But all right, biggest influence, I might know this one. Biggest influence in strength and conditioning, and favorite athlete growing up.
Favorite athlete, Bo Jackson. I was obsessed with Bo Jackson. For obvious reasons, just multi-sport, just super, like, all around athlete, jacked. So he was my guy. And then what was the first one?
So biggest influence in strength and conditioning.
Oh man, that's actually tough. It's my brother for sure. But I've had a lot of, Chris Doyle, Bill Maxwell, Mike Boyle, Coach Ma, and then just continued to learn from a lot of different people. But those are my main characters. Okay.
Hey, so I know you got a lot of stuff going on, but when you're not coaching, when you're not hanging out with the twins and the family, do you have any other hobbies that you didn't share with us yet?
Oh God. I'm definitely, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. My phone's okay. I'm definitely a tinkerer. I like to use my hands, and I like to create. So anything that's like involving kind of like building things, using my imagination. I'm kind of, this might sound weird, but I'm kind of into like upcycling things. Like, I don't like waste, and I like to like build things from like stuff that might just get tossed out. And like, so like I have like an angle grinder, I'll cut up metal pieces and make like a shelf out of like pallet boards and just kind of stuff like that. I just, keep my mind fresh.
There you go. Resourceful. It's just big kid Legos, basically.
Exactly.
Hey, so this one, when we talked about passion and everything, and you found what you're kind of like centered and focused on. But if you've ever given it any thought, if you weren't coaching, what do you think you would be doing?
Oh man, I'd be out building mountain bike trails or something outside. I'm so spoiled. I have a buddy who works for this company, who has a place. It's like a vacation a resort in Iceland. And so he called me up last year and said, "Hey, can I borrow you for a month or two in Iceland?" And he's like, "I got a contract to build these mountain bike trails." So anyways, I went over to Iceland and lived with him and built these mountain bike trails. And I tell you, I really enjoy being outside, and I really like working with my hands, and I like, being able to be out in the fresh air and that kind of thing.
Awesome. All right. So I know different sports, maybe different kind of moods, different kind of environment, but what's your go-to training music or like PR song? And what's your go-to like post-training meal look like?
Okay, so music, I've always been Rage Against the Machine, Tool. I remember back like when I owned my private gym, we would always crank like 30 Seconds to Mars album came out, and I would just put that CD on. And sometimes when you put a CD on and just let it play from the beginning, you get a totally different experience than if you just do the whole like, music generator app thing. And so I just like even today, like I have a garage gym, and I'll go out and I have an old school CD carousel, and I'll just like, Tool and like the first Eminem album. So yeah, it depends on the mood. But then there are times where like I really like to get into my like reading Zen like zone state, and I'll even listen to like Native American flute. So
that one's an eclectic one for sure. Hey, so last one I got for you for overtime here.
Oh, hold on, meal. You said food.
Yeah.
Post-training meal. Oh man, I don't know. We're really spoiled in Iowa City. We have like kind of wonderful like places to eat. My favorite go-to post-workout for the longest time, because it was just like a tradition, is we'd always go to we have like a local Tex-Mex place called Pancheros. And so me and Jack and Jake Poons, I don't know if you know Jake yet, but all these people who are kind of like a staple part of my gym. Like we train almost every day. We used to train like every day, like weekend. It was crazy, but we'd always go to Pancheros and get a big old burrito.
Well, funny you say that. That's Jack's go-to.
Yeah, there you go.
That's the one right off the bat. All right, so hey, last one I got for you for overtime. Yeah. What is the number one characteristic of a successful coach?
Oh man. You know what Chris Doyle always used to say, and even Mike Boyle, and they probably kind of because they come from the same lineage, is like, you never know enough. A beginner's mindset, everybody says it, but it's like to live it takes some commitment. To really know that the more you learn, the more there is to learn. It's so true. And for me, like that's been, I don't know if I'm doing anything right. But at the end of the day, I know that I'm still learning. And I know that like on a weekly basis, I'm still showing up to my speed and agility camps that I run right now, in the private training that I'm doing right now. I'm still tinkering. I'm still toying. I'm still like exploring. I mean, there's so much to know, but then you can't let that paralyze you too, because it really is like the basics, the foundational movements and that kind of stuff. But just staying curious and staying hungry to learn more, and knowing that that whole beginner mindset is really the key to continue growth and evolution.
Yeah, that's huge, and that's great advice, like the beginner mindset. But also, I think a lot of people understand that, and they understand that continuing education, kind of sharpening the sword, that stuff's important. But what you said second about not being paralyzed or not being afraid to kind of go with that gut and make changes or stick with what you already had, that stuff's just as important, because you can add to your repertoire, you can add to your tool belt all you want, but if you kind of feel paralyzed and you never make any changes, you're learning stuff and you're not applying it, it's not even worth it at that point.
Oh, that's interesting. That's huge. Yeah, I'm glad you just said that. Actually, for whatever reason, I'm glad to hear that from you, because it helps reinforce sometimes, because it takes a little bit of like an act of bravery, or just kind of like some conviction to like trust and to try and to know that like, you're seeing what you see, and you can try and you can tinker, and you can always like, well, if you explore. So I always like to, when I'm working with young kids, especially in speed and agility scenarios, I like to let them be involved sometimes in coming up with drills that involve somewhat like play, game like reaction, that kind of thing. I build the foundation, just like most coaches do, of like kind of teaching movement mechanics and posture and arm action, leg action, and all that stuff. But then to just allowing the freedom of like your mind in your coaching experiences to inform what you're doing and inform your practice.
Yeah, that autonomy and giving them kind of their ownership over that, and like you said, at the end of the day, it should be fun. So
yeah,
I've seen you do that with a lot of your drills with the guys and like the tag versions and the pool noodles and everything and that stuff. It just makes it more so much more beneficial to them, and I know they appreciate it. Hey, I know we could go on for the whole day with all this stuff, but for right now, how can people kind of follow you, get a hold of you if they have any questions or want to reach out and kind of pick your brain more?
Yeah. Got Strength. I have social media. Got Strength is my Instagram. I have a website. I don't really keep it updated, but it's there. But I'm on social media. They can reach out, or if you Google search, I think it's pretty easy to get a hold of my phone number. So, and I still to this day take on interns. The pandemic has been a little tricky, but I currently do have one intern, and I've had over the last, as long as I've been, coaching independently, I probably had well over 50 interns, and so I get fed a lot of wonderful people from the university because I have relationships. So, but I'm happy to always share and explore ideas and talk about anything training related or anything else. So yeah, feel free to reach out if anybody has any questions or comments.
Awesome. Hey man, well Phil, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This is like I said, this has been a decade in the making, and hopefully when the pandemic's over, we can actually do it in person.
Yes.
And maybe train a little bit together and stuff. But we'll definitely have to keep in touch and do this again. So I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, Nick. That was awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Awesome, man. Well, take care, bud.
Yeah, you too. All right. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.